Hey, New Hope Church. Pastor Jim here with episode 4 of our discussion of growing through anxiety. We were gone last week on vacation. We're back in the saddle and ready to dive into how do we grow through this anxiety? What proactive steps can we take to move through this? Well, I have enlisted the whiteboard. So we're going to start with whatever it is that brings you anxiety. Get that in your mind. Maybe it's a difficult conversation that you know that you need to have. Maybe it's being out in public with people. Maybe it's going to work. Whatever it is, we're going to call that the stimulus. Now, this model you'll find in a book by a man named Charles Duhigg called The Power of Habit. This isn't mine. I got this out of this book. But it talks about, this is called a habit loop. Habits start when we have something that causes us to take action. The action that we take, we want to bring us some kind of relief. So how does this work in anxiety? Something makes us anxious. It brings those worry emotions, which causes us to take action. Now, oftentimes, this is where people get into coping mechanisms. And most of the time, these coping mechanisms allow us to avoid doing something hard in order to bring some resolution to this stimulus. So if we choose to avoid doing something hard to bring some resolution here, avoiding will bring us some relief. It will make these anxious thoughts go away. I just choose let's say, if going out in public is something that's very anxiety inducing to me, I just choose I'm not going to go out. I'm just going to stay home and I'm going to avoid people. Well, that will bring some relief. However, it does not allow me to overcome my anxiety. It only strengthens a habit loop because this relief will go away when I come back up against this issue that continues to bring me anxiety because I'm not overcoming it. I'm continuing to bow to my desire to avoid whatever this is. So we might think, well, if I could just get myself to go out. Yes, but the action isn't where we want to go after. Where we want to focus is right here. Because this is that open space that we have right before we make a decision. This is the decision-making process. If we are able to hone in on this area and make a different decision, guess what? Our action can change. We can choose to do something different. But it's not about just the action. It's about learning how to get a hold of the thoughts and begin to change our thought processes. This thought process says, I want to avoid having these anxious feelings. And so I'm going to choose to just avoid it and not take on this problem. That's not what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to start thinking differently so that we can act differently. Our actions come from our thoughts. When we change our thoughts, we change our actions. So this is the spot right in here where we want to be able to grab onto some different thought processes. Now, oftentimes what people will do, they think that they wait for their emotions to lead them in different directions. When we're stuck in an anxiety habit loop, we're probably not going to, if we try to wait for our emotions to take us into a different action, we are going to be stuck in this same habit loop for probably a good part of our lives. We don't want to depend on our emotions to drive our actions. We want our thoughts to drive our actions. Because over time, if we're able to begin thinking differently, then we will begin to act differently. And when we start acting differently, guess what? we will find true relief, because we learn that we are powerful enough to make this switch. We learn that God is powerful enough to empower us to operate in a place of obedience. Now, these things that bring anxiety into our lives, guess what? They're going to be there the rest of our lives. So we're either going to choose this old habit loop for the rest of our lives, or we're going to choose something different. This is not where peace and contentment and the abundant life that Jesus promises us, it is not found in this anxiety habit loop. It's just not. This is about avoidance, and it's about hiding. This habit loop, when we are able to break out of this habit and head in a different direction that is based on obeying what Jesus says through the scriptures, oh my gosh, now we start to change our life. Now, you might say, well, that's easy. That's easy for you to say. Easier said than done, right? Well, what I want you to do is I want you to begin, if this is something that is of interest to you, I want you to start thinking, what are these negative thought patterns that are right in here that keep leading you down into actions that are designed to avoid? What are those thought patterns for you? Because when you identify those thought patterns, now we got something to work with. Now we got something to fight against. So I want you to think about that over this next week. When we get into the video for our last video for next week, then we're going to look at a really cool strategy that Jesus gives us throughout the New Testament. He talks so often about our minds and how our minds are renewed. And when our minds are renewed, then we start thinking differently. So we're going to look at several different scripture passages next week in the next video. But I want you to think about this. What are those negative thought patterns that end you down here in these actions to avoid whatever it is that causes anxiety in your life? So start thinking about that. And I will look forward to seeing you all next week in the next video, or whenever we see each other. So everybody have a great rest of your week, and we shall see you soon.